We're expecting to do just over 100 million this year.
You never understood the first thing about this.
Have you ever wondered how a boy who loved programming became the richest billionaire on the planet for decades? How did a Harvard dropout create a technology empire that changed the world? And does Bill Gates' wealth come from talent alone? Or is there also a hidden super strategy that few people know about? Welcome to today's video, where we will explore the journey to wealth, the fateful turning points, and the little-known dark side of Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft and one of the most powerful figures of the 20th and 21st centuries. Part 1. Bill Gates' distinctive childhood. Bill Gates was born in 1955 in Seattle, USA, into a well-off family. His father, William H. Gates Sr., was a famous lawyer. His mother, Mary Maxwell Gates, was a director of several charities and banks. But don't think Bill Gates' life was a bed of roses. His family background created an extremely competitive environment where he had to constantly strive to stand out. From a young age, Bill shows exceptional intelligence. At the age of 13, he first encountered a computer at Lakeside Private School, a fateful event that changed his life. Did you know? At that time, computers were a luxury and a rarity. But Bill Gates and his close friend Paul Allen quickly became addicted to programming. They spent hours in the computer room, to the point that they were warned by the school for spending too much time on the server. Part 2. The first steps and the failures. If you think Bill Gates became a billionaire overnight, forget it. Behind the glamour is a long journey, full of trials, failures, and crazy decisions that most people wouldn't dare to make. And that journey began when he was just a 15-year-old teenager. In 1970, when many of his peers were still busy with childish games, Bill Gates and his best friend, Paul Allen, worked together to develop a software to track traffic. Imagine, two boys, not old enough to drive, write a program to help adults manage cars on the road. It sounds strange, but it's true. The software, which they call transformative, was a system that analyzes data from traffic counters on the road. It can calculate the number of vehicles traveling on each route, analyze peak times, and help the government improve traffic infrastructure. And the result? They made $20,000, a lot of money at the time, especially for two boys who were still in school. But it wasn't just the money. It was the feeling of having created something of real value for the first time. They were no longer just kids playing with computers. They were innovators, problem solvers. But guess what? Transformative eventually failed. The company didn't grow as they'd hoped. Their system was riddled with bugs, and the local government eventually refused to use it because they didn't trust two inexperienced boys. An early failure, a headfirst dive into reality. But Gates himself later said, "Transformative didn't work, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me." Why? Because it taught him about markets, about customers, and most of all, about how sometimes it's not enough to have a good idea, but how to turn it into a scalable commercial product. After graduating from high school, Bill Gates was accepted into Harvard University, one of the most prestigious and rigorous schools in the United States, which has produced the world's top presidents, scholars, scientists, and entrepreneurs. Imagine you are a freshman walking onto the magnificent campus of Harvard, surrounded by the most brilliant minds on the planet. People will expect you to work hard to get good grades, pursue a degree, and follow the path that society has laid out for you. But Bill Gates was not like that. He didn't care much about grades. While other students buried themselves in books on economics, law, or politics, Gates spent most of his time in the school's computer lab. He even skipped class, just to program all night, tinkering with the lines of code as if they were poems, songs that only he understood. It wasn't laziness. It was obsession. He didn't just study. He lived in the world of technology. For Bill, computers were more than just tools. They were doors that opened to the future. And it was at Harvard on a winter evening that Paul Allen, who was working for a technology company at that time, ran up to Gates with a magazine in his hand. The magazine had a picture of the Altair 8800, the first personal computer that had just been introduced to the public. The two looked at each other, and in that moment, they knew. The moment had come. The opportunity was before them. If they didn't seize it now, someone else would. And then, Just 2 years after enrolling at Harvard, the school that millions dream of, Bill Gates decides to drop out. Yes, you heard it right. A student studying at Harvard, with a bright future ahead of him, gave up everything to pursue the only thing that made his heart beat faster: technology. It was a crazy decision. His parents were extremely disappointed. His friends called him a dreamer. Some even thought he was ruining his life. But deep down, Gates believed, if not now, then never. Later, when he became a billionaire, people often asked him, "Do you regret dropping out of Harvard?" He smiled and replied, "I don't advise anyone to drop out, but for me, it was the right thing to do." And you know what? Sometimes success doesn't come from taking the safe path. It comes from daring to believe in what others think is crazy. Part 3. Microsoft, the game of those who dare to think big. When Bill Gates decided to drop out of Harvard, he had nothing in his hands but a strong belief that personal computers would change the world. No college degree, no large capital, no backing from venture capitalists. But he had something more valuable than anything: a brilliant mind and a loyal companion, Paul Allen. In 1975, in a small room in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 2 young men officially founded Microsoft. This name, you know, is a combination of microcomputer, personal computer, and software. Software, a simple name, but full of ambition. No one knew who they were. No one believed they would make it. But that was an advantage. At the time, most people, including large corporations, thought that computers were for business, or the military, or high-end research labs. Who needed a computer on their desk at home? But Gates was different. He saw a future where others saw only limitations. For him, personal computers would not just be tools, they would be an essential part of everyday life. And he knew, if computers were to become ubiquitous, software would be everything. Whoever controlled the software controlled the future. The Altair 8800, the first door to history. When the Altair 8800 was first introduced, it had no operating system, no software. In other words, it was just a metal box with a blinking light. Bill Gates and Paul Allen, then just 2 unknown programmers, called the company that made the Altair MITS, Micro-Instrumentation and Telemetry Systems, and said they had a programming language called BASIC that could run on the Altair. The truth was they hadn't written anything. That's right, they hadn't written the software, but they dared to call, to commit, to be confident that they could do it. Within weeks, they worked day and night to write the first version of BASIC for the Altair. When Paul Allen showed it to the MITS executives, everything worked. The deal was signed soon after. It was Microsoft's first customer. A small deal, but it was the foundation of a software empire. Bill Gates, not just a programmer, but a genius strategist. From an early age, Gates showed that he was not only good at technology, but also extremely sharp in business. When other software companies sold their programs outright, Gates took a different approach. He kept the copyright to the software and only sold the rights to use it. He knew that if he sold it outright, he would only make money once. But if he kept the copyright, Microsoft would get a share of every computer sold forever. And then, the biggest opportunity of his life came. 1980, the historic contract with the giant IBM. At this time, IBM, the world's largest computer corporation, was looking to enter the personal computer market. They needed an operating system for their new product line, but they didn't have time to develop it themselves. At first, they approached a company called Digital Research, but the negotiations failed. And so, IBM went to Microsoft. The interesting thing is, Microsoft didn't have an operating system at the time. But once again, Gates confidently committed. He quickly bought a simple operating system called QDOS from another programmer for only about $50,000 and turned it into his own product, MS-DOS. He gave it to IBM, but he didn't sell it outright. He just licensed it. And the rest is history. The IBM PC was released in 1981, and it became a global phenomenon. Millions were sold. And every single one of those computers, from the US, Europe, to Asia, ran Microsoft's MS-DOS. Microsoft exploded, from a tiny company to a software empire. Not just making software, but creating a standard. Bill Gates understood that software is not just a tool, it's an ecosystem. So he didn't just write a single program. He built a platform, a standard that the entire industry had to follow. All software developers who wanted to be compatible with MS-DOS had to write software that conformed to Microsoft standards. And when hardware companies wanted to compete with IBM, they had to choose the most popular operating system, MS-DOS. And so, Microsoft not only controlled software, but also shaped the personal computer industry. Bill Gates, the man who dared to think big and dared to bet it all. Just think, how many young people dare to drop out of Harvard? How many dare to cheat time to sign a contract without a product? How many dare to bet their future on a dream that the whole world doesn't believe in? Bill Gates did it, and his success was not due to luck, but to thinking differently. He didn't wait for the future. He built the future. And that's why Microsoft, the company he and Paul Allen built from a small room, has become one of the most powerful businesses in the world. Part 4. Windows, when the success musical is starting. After the explosive success of MS-DOS and the historic deal with IBM, Bill Gates faced a big question. What's next? He knew that the technology industry never stood still. What was popular today could be obsolete tomorrow. And if Microsoft stopped at MS-DOS, a dry command line operating system, one day someone would surpass it. And then Bill Gates began to think about something bigger, more intuitive, and more popular. The world was changing, and Microsoft had to be the leader. At this time, a new trend was emerging, the graphical user interface GUI. Instead of having to type each command line, users could control the computer with a mouse, icons, and windows. This idea was not entirely new. Apple with the Macintosh was also pursuing it. But Gates didn't just want to create a pretty interface. He wanted to create a comprehensive, popular, cheap operating system that could run on millions of different computers, from IBM to Compaq, Dell, HP. And so, in 1985, after many years of development and testing, Microsoft launched a product called Windows 1.0. Windows 1.0, an imperfect but bold start. The initial reaction? Not too impressive. Windows 1.0 was buggy, slow, and lacked applications. But the important thing is, Microsoft had laid the first brick for a graphical interface empire. And Bill Gates didn't give up. He and his team continued to develop. In 1987, Windows 2.0 was released, more advanced, faster. But it wasn't until Windows 3.0, 1990, that Microsoft really created a big hit. Windows 3.0 sold more than 10 million copies in just a few years. The world began to look to Microsoft as the one who defined the personal computer experience. And that was just the beginning. Windows 95, a global explosion. On August 24, 1995, Microsoft officially released Windows 95, and this was considered one of the most epic technology events in history. Would you believe it? Thousands of people lined up in front of computer stores the night before just to buy a software. The company even hired the Rolling Stones to use the song, "Start Me Up," for the promotional campaign. The image of the start button, start, appeared for the first time and became a classic symbol in the technology world. Windows 95 was not only beautiful, but also powerful, easy to use, and integrated with many modern features, such as plug and play, internet support, multitasking support. It made the computer a part of the daily life of millions of people. When Microsoft became irreplaceable, after Windows 95, subsequent versions, such as Windows 98, Windows XP, Windows 7, continuously held the #1 position in the market. And at this time, Bill Gates had truly turned Microsoft into the king of software. Every personal computer sold, there was a high probability that it ran Windows. From offices to schools, from hospitals to homes, Windows was everywhere. Bill Gates did not just succeed. He created the standard. And at the age of less than 40, he was the richest man in the world. Part 5. Controversies, pressures, and transformation. But behind that halo, what is it? It is pressure. It is controversy. It is criticism. It is sleepless nights when having to protect the empire he built. The most intense legal battle in the history of technology. In the late 1990s, the US government began investigating Microsoft for alleged monopoly. Specifically, Microsoft was accused of forcing computer manufacturers to install Internet Explorer on their Windows operating systems, leaving other browsers like Netscape with no chance of competing. This was not just a normal lawsuit. It was a symbolic battle between a giant software empire and the federal government. Bill Gates, who was a private person, had to go to court, face the press, answer the most difficult questions. In some hearing videos, people saw him tense, cold, even somewhat annoyed. Many people began to ask, had Microsoft gone too far? Was Gates still a symbol of innovation, or just a monopoly tycoon? Result, Microsoft lost the case and had to accept splitting up some operations, changing the way it did business. The pressure to succeed and the price. Underneath the facade of a tech genius, there is a man who works himself to the bone. Gates is known as an extremely demanding, meticulous CEO, and harsh on his own employees. He can spend hours arguing over just a small technical detail. He requires employees to think like him, work like him, and sometimes surpass him. That's why, although many people succeed when working with Gates, many leave Microsoft because they can't stand the pressure. But Gates never regrets. He believes, if you want to do something great, you have to demand uncompromising standards. The big turning point, leaving the CEO position. In 2000, after more than 2 decades at the helm of Microsoft, Bill Gates suddenly resigned as CEO, leaving this position to Steve Ballmer. Part 6, Legacy and Great Lessons from Bill Gates. When the spotlight fades, people will remember Bill Gates not only as a software king, but also as a man who rewrote the definition of success. At the age of 20, he dropped out of college. At the age of 30, he was the youngest billionaire in the world. At the age of 40, he was doubted and criticized by the entire technology world. But at the age of 50, he made the world look at him with completely different eyes, admiration and respect. From technology empire to human mission, when he gave up the position of CEO of Microsoft, many people thought that Bill Gates would rest comfortably in his million-dollar castle. But he did not choose to rest. He chose to act. Together with his wife, Melinda Gates, he founded the world's largest charitable foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with a clear mission to make the world more equitable, not just a charity for show. The Gates Foundation invests systematically, strategically, and transparently in the following areas: preventing diseases such as malaria, HIV, tuberculosis, and especially investing heavily in vaccine research, improving education, bringing technology to poor schools, building teacher training systems, access to basic health care for millions of people in remote areas of Africa and Asia, sustainable agriculture, helping farmers in developing countries increase productivity, reducing poverty. The total amount he has donated so far, more than $50 billion US. And it doesn't stop there. He has pledged to give away 99% of his assets during his lifetime. When a billionaire knows enough, have you ever wondered, why does a person who has everything, power, money, fame, choose to give? Bill Gates' answer is simple, but profound. I don't need that much to live, but the world needs more people willing to share. In him, we don't see any bragging. There are no supercars, million-dollar yachts, or gold-plated villas. What he likes most is reading. He reads more than 50 books a year, and not novels, but books on science, economics, history, medicine, because he always believes that knowledge is the most powerful weapon to change the future. Lifetime lessons from Bill Gates. If there's one thing that Bill Gates' journey has left for the world, it is not just software, it is thinking. Here are 5 valuable lessons that anyone, whether a student, a working person, or an entrepreneur, can learn from him. 1. You don't need to come from a special position. You just need to have strong faith. Bill Gates was not born into a super rich family. He was not an angel, but he believed in the future of personal computers at a time when the whole world was skeptical. A timely belief can turn into the greatest asset. 2. Learn to look ahead and dare to act before others see. While the whole world was still struggling with DOS, Gates was preparing for Windows. When no one believed that the internet was a trend, he integrated Internet Explorer into the operating system. When the world was still struggling with profits, He thought of vaccines for Africa. Great people do not wait for the future, they create it. 3. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, only afraid of not learning from mistakes. Bill Gates failed. Windows 1.0 was criticized. Internet Explorer was controversial. But he kept learning, kept improving, kept moving forward. Mistakes don't kill you, only arrogance does. 4. When you're old enough, give more than you receive. No one forced Bill Gates to do charity, but he did it. Not for fame, but for responsibility. True success, not how much you have, but what value you create for others. 5. Knowledge is an eternal treasure. Bill Gates reads books every day. Take notes of every detail. Think like a scientist. When the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, he was one of the first to warn and propose solutions based on real scientific research, not emotions. You can lose money, lose reputation, but if you have knowledge, you will never lose direction. Bill Gates, the man who did not stop at computers. Today, although he has left Microsoft, Bill Gates is still an inseparable name from modern human history. He is not only a symbol of technology, but also a symbol of human intelligence. From a student who loved programming to a technology billionaire. From a technology billionaire to a great philanthropist. From a misunderstood person to someone who inspired a generation. Bill Gates' story tells us that you don't have to be perfect to start. You don't need to be recognized to do the right thing. And you don't have to wait until you're rich to start contributing to the world. You just have to start. If this video inspires you, don't forget to share it with someone who is searching for their life purpose. Because sometimes, just one story can change a life.